The Unraveling of Our Perfect Family. Hey Reddit, I need to get this off my chest because I feel like my world is falling apart. My family has always been the epitome of perfection, or so I thought. But recent events have shattered that illusion, and I don't know how to move forward. To give you some background, my name is Lily, 25, and I have two siblings, my older brother, Jake, 30, and my younger sister, Sophie, 20. Our parents, Tom and Mary, have been married for 32 years. They've always seemed like the perfect couple, the kind of love story you see in movies. They met in college, fell in love, and have been inseparable ever since. Or so it seemed. It all started a few months ago when I noticed my mom acting strangely. She was more distant, lost in her thoughts, and often found herself staring out the window for long periods. I brushed it off initially, thinking it was just the stress of daily life. But then, my dad started acting differently too. He was more irritable and easily agitated, which was so unlike him. Then came the night that changed everything. We were all gathered for a family dinner, something we do once a month to stay connected. It was a tradition that I cherished. My parents, Jake, Sophie, and I were all there, enjoying a meal and each other's company. That's when my mom stood up to make an announcement. Her face was pale, and her hands were trembling. She took a deep breath and began, "I have something I need to tell you all. It's something I've kept hidden for a very long time, but I can't keep it to myself any longer. I need to tell the truth." We all sat there, stunned and confused. My dad's face was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his posture. Jake and Sophie exchanged worried glances. I felt my heart begin to race, sensing that whatever she was about to say was going to change everything. My mom continued, 31 years ago, I had an affair. It was a brief, passionate fling, and it ended as quickly as it began. I was young, confused, and made a terrible mistake. I've regretted it every day since. But that's not all. There's more. There's a possibility that Jake might not be your biological son, Tom. The silence that followed her confession was deafening. My dad's face turned a shade of white I'd never seen before. Jake looked like he'd been punched in the gut, and Sophie started sobbing uncontrollably. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me, and I was falling into an abyss. Jake was the first to speak. "What the hell, Mom? How could you keep something like this from us? From Dad? From me?" His voice was filled with a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. My mom started crying, pleading for understanding. I was scared, Jake. I didn't know how to tell you, and as the years went by, it became harder and harder to bring it up. I love you all so much, and I didn't want to destroy our family. My dad, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. His voice was calm but laced with pain. "Mary, you've betrayed me in the worst possible way. But Jake, no matter what a DNA test says, you are my son. I've raised you, loved you, and nothing can change that." Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air," he said, and walked out the door. I wanted to follow him, but I was frozen in place, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. Sophie's sobs grew louder, and I moved to comfort her, wrapping my arms around her trembling form. My dad just sat there, staring at my mom with a look of profound sadness. My mom kept apologizing, but her words seemed hollow in the face of such a monumental betrayal. The days that followed were a blur. Jake refused to speak to anyone and moved out to stay with a friend. My dad retreated into himself, spending long hours at work or locked away in his study. Sophie and I tried to keep things together, but it felt like our family was disintegrating before our eyes. Jake eventually agreed to take a DNA test. The wait for the results was agonizing. When they finally came, it confirmed our worst fears: Jake was not my dad's biological son. The news hit us like a sledgehammer. Jake was devastated, and my dad, despite his earlier words, seemed to crumble under the weight of the confirmation. My mom, who had hoped against hope that the affair hadn't resulted in a pregnancy, was inconsolable. She tried to reach out to Jake, but he shut her out completely. The bond between them seemed irreparably broken. In the midst of all this, I found myself playing the role of mediator, trying to keep the lines of communication open between my family members. I encouraged my parents to seek counseling, both individually and together. My dad was resistant at first, but he eventually agreed, recognizing that they needed professional help to navigate through this storm. Sophie was struggling too. She felt like she had lost her family, and the stress of it all was affecting her studies. I encouraged her to see a therapist, and she reluctantly agreed. Slowly, she started to open up about her feelings, and I could see a glimmer of hope in her eyes. As for Jake, he was a mess. He felt like his entire identity had been shattered. The man he had always called Dad was not his biological father, and the mother he had adored had lied to him his entire life. He was filled with anger and resentment, not just towards my mom, but towards the world for turning his life upside down. One night, after weeks of silence, Jake finally reached out to me. He asked if we could meet up and talk. I agreed immediately, eager to reconnect with my brother. We met at a small cafe that we used to frequent when we were kids. The place was filled with memories, and I hoped it would provide some comfort. Jake looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. We ordered coffee and sat in silence for a while, just absorbing each other's presence. Finally, Jake broke the silence. I don't know who I am anymore, Lily. Everything I thought I knew about my life is a lie. How do I move forward from this? I reached out and took his hand. You're still Jake. You're still my brother. And no matter what the DNA test says, Dad loves you. We all do. This doesn't change who you are, it just adds another layer to your story. He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. I know, but it's so hard. I feel like a stranger in my own life. I can't pretend to understand what you're going through, I said, but I'm here for you, and so is Sophie. We're your family, and we'll get through this together. Maybe you could consider finding your biological father, if that's something you want. Jake looked thoughtful. I've been thinking about it. I found some information on the guy Mom had the affair with. He's still around, and I'm considering reaching out. But I'm scared, Lily. What if he wants nothing to do with me? I squeezed his hand. Then you'll know. And you can start to build a new relationship or find closure. Either way, it's a step forward. Jake took a deep breath and nodded. Yeah, you're right. I'll think about it. As we left the cafe, I felt a sense of hope. It was a small step, but it was progress. Jake was beginning to confront his new reality, and I was determined to support him every step of the way. Meanwhile, my parents' counseling sessions were ongoing. They were both committed to the process, though it was clear that it was going to be a long road to recovery. My dad was struggling to trust my mom again, and my mom was grappling with the guilt and shame of her actions. But they were talking, which was more than they had done in weeks. Sophie's therapy was also helping her. She was starting to come to terms with the upheaval in our family and finding ways to cope with her anxiety and stress. Her grades were improving, and she seemed more like her old self each day. As for me, I was learning to navigate my own feelings about the situation. It was hard not to feel betrayed by my mom, but I also understood that she was human and had made a terrible mistake. I was trying to find a balance between supporting my family and taking care of myself. Months passed, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. Jake decided to reach out to his biological father, and to his surprise, the man was open to meeting him. It was an emotional reunion, filled with tears and long conversations. Jake discovered that his biological father was a kind, decent man who had no idea about his existence. They began to build a relationship, and it was helping Jake find some semblance of peace. My parents were making progress in their counseling. My dad was learning to forgive, and my mom was working hard to rebuild the trust she had shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were many setbacks, but they were committed to their marriage and to each other. Sophie was thriving again. She had found new strength through her therapy and was more focused on her future than ever before. She even started dating someone, and it was wonderful to see her so happy. As for me, I found solace in writing. I started journaling. Bonus story. A family secret unveiled. Hey Reddit, I'm in need of some serious advice. A massive bombshell just dropped in my family, and I don't know how to handle it. So, my parents have been married for 30 years. They've always seemed like the perfect couple, high school sweethearts, rarely argued, always affectionate. I have an older brother, Mike, 28, and a younger sister, Emily, 18. I'm Sarah, 25. Last weekend, we had a big family dinner to celebrate my dad's 55th birthday. Everything was going great until my mom stood up to make a toast. She started off reminiscing about their life together, but then she dropped the bombshell. She had an affair 26 years ago. She said she couldn't live with the secret any longer and needed to come clean. The room went silent. My dad's face turned ghostly white. Mike looked like he was about to explode, and Emily just started crying. My mom said the affair was brief and ended quickly, but there was one more thing she had to reveal. There was a possibility that Mike might not be my dad's biological son. I felt like the ground was pulled from under me. Mike, who has always been my rock, the most stable person I know, just got up and left without saying a word. My dad quietly asked everyone to leave. The party was over. I've been trying to process all of this. Mike hasn't answered any of my calls or texts, my dad has locked himself in his study, and my mom is a wreck. Emily is staying with a friend because she can't handle the tension at home. What do I do? How do I support my family through this? Should Mike take a DNA test? Should I encourage my parents to go to counseling? I'm lost, Reddit. Any advice would be appreciated. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a month since I posted about the family bombshell, and I wanted to give you all an update. Thanks for all the advice and support, you have no idea how much it helped me. First off, Mike agreed to take a DNA test. It was an emotional roller coaster convincing him, but eventually, he understood that knowing the truth was better than living with uncertainty. We got the results last week. Mike is not my dad's biological son. When the results came in, it was like reliving the nightmare all over again. Mike broke down, something I've never seen him do. My dad? I don't think I've ever seen someone look so devastated. Despite the DNA results, he told Mike that he's still his son and nothing will change that. It was one of the few moments of solace in this whole mess. My parents have started counseling, both individually and together. My dad initially didn't want to go, but he realized that if there was any chance of saving their marriage, they needed professional help. It's slow progress, but it's progress nonetheless. Emily came back home after staying with her friend for a week. She's still struggling, but she's seeing a therapist to help her cope. The house feels like it's under a dark cloud, but we're trying to support each other. As for my mom, she's been trying to make amends. She apologized to all of us individually, but it's hard to forgive her right now. I know she's remorseful, but the wound is too fresh. One positive outcome is that Mike and I have grown even closer. We've had long talks about our childhood, our bond, and how we're going to move forward as siblings. He's considering reaching out to his biological father, though he's not sure if he's ready for that step yet. This whole experience has been a whirlwind, and I'm not sure when things will feel normal again. But we're taking it one day at a time, leaning on each other, and hoping that time will heal these wounds. Thanks again, Reddit, for being there for me. I'll keep you updated if anything major happens. For now, we're just trying to rebuild our family, piece by piece.